All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Shepard. I'm the Director of Global Marketing with the Founder Institute. Thanks for joining us today for our online founder hot seat. I'm joined today by Dustin Betts and Mike Supervici. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike. I lead the Alumni Success Group at the Founder Institute, and our role is to help portfolio companies scale. And we try to do that in any way that we can. Sometimes we do it through various structured programs. Other times we do it, through one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat. At this point, our portfolio is at over 4,000 companies. So there's very many ideas and approaches that I've seen work and not work, and I'm happy to share any of my insights on that as well. Prior to doing this role, I was a startup founder just like you, built a company, raised money, did all that. So I'm able to share my knowledge from that perspective as well.
And my name is Dustin Betts. I am FI's digital content editor. So on a day-to-day basis, I'm helping founders basically tell their stories, whether that's through our blog or newsletter, and helping them basically get some early coverage that hopefully transforms into earned media and helps them grow their businesses.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So today we're going to go ahead and go through a little bit about best practices for the workshop, which is basically we're just going to help you sort of outline your pitch a little bit more clearly. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Founder Institute. It's going to be real brief. And then we'll go straight into pitch feedback Q&A. We've received some questions or some pitches, excuse me, already from some founders. And so we're going to go over that a little bit. And then after that, we'd love to go over your pitches as well live. So please put them in the chat. It's really important that we get a chance to review pitches. So we'll go over the format for that specifically, and then we'll get started. Okay, so really quickly, two other things. We're going to be reviewing pitches on clarity, presentation, and content, as well as the business idea, validity, potential risks. Letting us know where you're from is also super helpful because sometimes that provides us with some context on what, whether or not your idea is valid and how that fits into the general, sort of feel of your pitch. So a couple of guidelines. You want to say my company, name of company, is developing a defined offering. Keep your company name really simple. The more simple the better. And defined offering, be very clear. What is it? Do not use buzzwords. Is it a dual-sided platform? Is it an app? Be specific. To help a defined audience, really defining your audience helps us a lot to determine whether or not the idea is valid. And I've seen a lot of pitches recently where that's not the case, meaning that they have not defined their audience clearly enough. So really dig in and see if you can be truly specific about who you're defining your company for best. Next is solving a problem. So make sure that you have a clear problem to solve and that your business is truly solving one problem for one person, especially at this very early stage. And lastly, your secret sauce. What is your unique value proposition and sales proposition? Why is your business different from the others in your space? Why should people use your service or product versus anyone else's? So be very clear about that. If you need to reference this framework at any time, we'll have it up on the screen as a resting slide, but if you need to reference it, you can go to fi.co/madlibs, and that should provide a little more clarity there as well as more specifics. So I'll turn it over to Mike to talk a little bit about FI.
Yeah, so the Founder Institute is the world's largest pre-seed startup accelerator. We've been around for over 10 years now, have over 15,000 mentors, operate in over 200 cities at this point, over 4,000 alumni, as we mentioned before. And basically, we are there to help you get the traction and funding. That's kind of our main role. And then we will support you for the rest of your company's life in any way that we can, by leveraging the network, activating it to your success, right? And so that's basically what we do. We've had several unicorns already as part of this portfolio, and we continue to scale that as we continue to increase our reach.
Fantastic, thanks, Mike. Okay, so next up, we'll be going over some pitch feedback. So we're going to start with the first pitch that we had submitted to us. So Chris from North Dakota said, my company, Enlight, is developing an app to help teachers become experts on their students because the lack of student engagement coupled with high teacher burnout is resulting in bad educational environments in the US. With our platform, we provide educators the information that they need to productively engage and motivate their students. That's
I understand what you do. The pitch was clear. I struggle in understanding how you actually do this, right? Because in general, for a product like this, you would need to get the data from somewhere, whether it's student input or something like that. And without that, then, you know, if you have bad data, you have bad advice essentially for teachers. So it would really help, you know, to talk a little bit about what you have discovered that allows you to do this now versus before, right? There's been lots of people that have tried this for a long time in the ed tech space. And for some reason, some of them work better than others, right? And so maybe there's like some sort of unique insight that you were able to figure out that kind of helps you attain that. And that would be really, really helpful in a pitch like this, right? The other thing too is, I guess I'm a little unclear who your customer is, whether it's truly teachers or whether it's school districts. There's always this kind of balance, right? About who pays you. And, you know, if the customer is a teacher, great, right? Like this works, then you charge, and you should say like we charge a subscription and something like that. That would also really help. If it's the school district, then you're solving a different problem for them. Maybe it's so that, you know, they can get more funding from the government if they, you know, reach certain assessment levels or something like that. That's probably what you would need to do in your pitch in order to better define kind of the audience.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like the problem is well defined here. I mean, I think student engagement, and I think that this pitch could also be pretty adapted pretty easily to talk about education in the context of COVID, and that the offering could make sense. But I agree with Mike. I think that the unique value in terms of your how or your magic sauce, you know, what is it about your version of this that is going to help you actually be the one to solve this problem. So good job with defining the problem. I think, yeah, just be a little more clear in how you're going to do it with that UVP.
awesome. All right. Susan is up next. Before we review Susan's, don't forget to put your pitch in the chat. That's how we get the pitches to be able to review them. So we'll definitely want to make sure we get to yours today. So definitely put your pitches in the chat. So Susan from San Francisco says, my company, My Chain Omics, Finding Cures, Rewarding Participants, is developing a BaaS, a blockchain as a service app, to increase participant enrollment into clinical research studies integrating AI and machine learning. Participants are rewarded and compensated when matched to qualified studies. Our platform will disrupt, democratize, and decentralize the multi-trillion-dollar drug discovery vertical and research sectors. Our first focus will be on COVID-19, urgency for vaccines and drugs.
So it's really unclear who your customer is, right? Like, are you selling this to hospitals? Are you selling this to pharma companies? Are you selling this to consumers? And all of them have a different set of problems. And so lead with that versus like the blockchain as a service kind of thing. I'm not really sure why blockchain makes sense for this. I guess I could extrapolate from that, but you don't really want to do that. You have to have a really good case for something like blockchain, because in general, like a lot of these decentralized solutions are slower for a variety of reasons, right? And so just make sure that you mention why it's super important to the customer, right? So to the pharmaceutical company, if this is the customer, that you are using the blockchain to be able to do that. And to be able to get all these like insights or whatever it is that they need. So make sure that you do that. I also heard AI and I also heard machine learning. Generally, you don't need to put that in a pitch. You know, it's more important about like exactly how that problem gets solved, right? So for example, with the pitch like yours, I would build this all from the perspective of, you know, the custom archetype that says the pharma company, then I would tie that into COVID-19 and how that's affected their drug research process, and how you basically help make that faster, and as a result, they're willing to pay you a lot of money to do it. right? And that's what I would do as a stuff versus kind of building it backwards from like, oh, I want to build like this platform that has blockchain, that has this, and that, right? Start with the customer. That will really help you define this much faster and much crisper.
Yeah, I agree. I think this one's just a little heavy on the buzzword usage. I mean, we know, you know, the how blockchain is typically described as, you know, disrupt, democratize, decentralize. I agree. I don't really think that this business as described necessarily needs some kind of underlying blockchain based solution. And if it does, I think it just needs to be made more clear as to why. Like, I think that this the problem sort of as described, like, it is very obviously relevant right now. We want to be seeing, you know, increased participants and enrollments in clinical research trials, and we want tech-enabled solutions. But yeah, I just think, yeah, defining the unique value here could be a little more clear. And if there is a place that blockchain plays a role in your actual value you're providing, I think make it a little more clear, because here it does seem like it's kind of plugged in as a way to make this sound a little buzzier.
Fantastic. And I think we've got some ideas coming in the chat, which is awesome. If you are just joining us, don't forget to check out fi.co/madlibs for the format in which you can submit your pitch for us to review. So this is great. Next up is Gage from Melbourne. It says, Test Your Ideas is developing a website that allows users to ask a market research question and get guaranteed responses, which is normally prohibitively expensive for startups and small to medium businesses. All of this is free.
Okay, so I think if it's free, then you would have to kind of define some sort of way that you're going to make money. Also, why your results are going to be better than other competitors, like Ask Your Target Market and things like that. That would also be really, really helpful in here. Like, just because you're free, that doesn't necessarily mean you're better. Although I do, obviously, that's a differentiator. But talk about that, and then also talk about, who is this geared towards marketers, right? And they're trying to work on different marketing messages for different audiences, or is this more for other people that are doing like research studies on, like, what the next user interface should look like for a product? Because that is a different market with different needs and different different amounts of necessary type of engagement, right? So make sure that you actually go out and specify that in your pitch, because I think it will make it a lot stronger.
Yeah, nothing else to add there. I think that this one is definitely concise, but there's a little bit of information that is sort of missing here. You talk about that it's usually prohibitively expensive for startups to do this, and you're going to do it for free. I think describing how you actually plan to make money, who is your customer that needs to get it.
Also, I mean, if this is super valuable, which it seems like it is, consider charging for it. Making money is a really good thing for your company, and it's a really good thing for your company being an enduring business. And oftentimes what happens when you don't charge the direct customer, right? Like the person that you're actually trying to help. But so let's say in this case, the reason you started this company is because you wanted to help marketers get better research. And you decided to give it to them for free, and then you're going to monetize some other people, maybe like some sort of sponsors or something like that. Well, then that means that the sponsors actually become your customers, right? Versus like the marketers that you initially set out to. And what happens in that scenario is that you're essentially going to do everything you can to please your customer, which is like, let's say the sponsors in the example that I gave, versus the people that you were trying to help in the first place, which is the marketers, right? And so just if you started this business because you wanted to help marketers or whoever it is, it actually sometimes makes sense for you just to basically charge them for something that's super valuable, and it's okay, right? There's still opportunity for you to build a better product that's more valuable for that audience versus, say, some of your competitors, and still charge for it and build a sustainable and enduring business.
Fantastic. Next up is Sam from New York. Says, my company Flary is developing an insurance exchange to help migrants compare and buy private health insurance for their loved ones abroad.
Okay, that's interesting. But I do struggle with the abroad thing, right? Because essentially every single market has different insurance options and different healthcare systems altogether. And so, because you didn't define kind of where the migrants are going and what type of markets you're targeting, it's almost like too out there and too broad, and there's too many things going on to make this like really, really clear. And as a result, I can't really tell you if this is like a super good idea or a bad idea. It's just kind of like I have to kind of assume what you want this business to be, and then kind of make a decision based on that, right? And so in your case, be very specific. Like, first of all, I think that for your business to work, you should probably pick one set of migrants that's going to one specific jurisdiction or one specific country. Once you figure that out, then you can take that playbook and then you can go to all these other places. So let's say it's migrants to the United States. That works great. Then you try to take that playbook and do, migrants to some other place. Since you're in New York, maybe start with migrants to New York from a very specific country or something like that. And then say, then I'm going to go to California next, or go to Massachusetts next, or something like that, and then kind of build that out, right? The other thing too is, it's again, if the migrant is your customer, right, then that's different than kind of like the loved ones. So you brought that in as if somebody else is paying for it, and that's also really unclear. So I don't know who's actually paying for this. And so it's also like hard to understand kind of like the value prop from the way you position it. So try to clean those up, and I think it'll get much tighter as a result, the pitch will.
Yeah, the thing I like about it is that remittances are like such a huge kind of segment, and so I think it's an interesting take on remittances, like, yeah, purchasing a health insurance plan, but totally agree with Mike's feedback, because each country's health insurance plans are different. Like, we just need more specificity here to be able to evaluate it.
Yeah, that's awesome feedback. I would also add, if any of you are submitting chats or pitches right now in the chat, I would recommend that you sort of tie in, if at all, how this current global crisis we're in, how COVID-19 affects your company, right? So there are some pitches that I think we've been hearing a lot, through all of the different things we do at Founder Institute that don't have a ton of that may change significantly post COVID-19. So definitely feel free to add that into your pitch as well. All right, next up is Tallulah in London. Says, my company Fancy is developing a 6 degrees of separation dating app to help people over 30s in London find love through a network of kindness and feedback.
Again, dating is tough, right? And it's just a lot of competition, a lot of really, really expensive cost of customer acquisition, really expensive, because all the main players in the space, right, the Tinders of the world, just spend a lot of money and are able to acquire people faster. So in your case, you really need some level of like viral component for it to work really, really well. And kind of build off of that, 6 degrees of separation, so that it can grow really quickly. So you really need to address that. It's just such a tough industry with so many different competitors. So in your case, you can't be better than Tinder. You just can't. You need to be like 10x better than Tinder, like literally, for you to be able to get enough traction for you to be able to, so that other people turn their friends and you don't have to spend the money that they do to be able to acquire them. So think about that, right? And I think that's super important. To Rachel's point earlier, it would be really cool if you could also sprinkle in some thoughts about how you think dating will change over the next 18 months as a result of COVID-19, and how you think that you fit in better as a result. So just think about that as well.
Yeah, nothing to add on that one. I agree. It's definitely a really, really tough space. So it just needs to be clear, because the big guys have the economies of scale. So you need to find another way that you're going to really differentiate yourself.
Awesome. Okay, next up is Masa. It says, my company Socket is developing a budgeting automation software to help young professionals to build financial freedom with 24/7 SMS-based financial planner that helps our customers stay on track for financial goals.
Yeah, so it sounds kind of like a Mint that's on SMS or something like that, which definitely has potential. The key is to make this like really frictionless. So one of the challenging things with products like this is retention of customers and behavior changes, right? So it's helpful to have a coach for financial literacy and things like that, and it's certainly valuable. What happens in this space, though, is that usually the retention is not great because a lot of people will use it for a little while and then they'll stop using it. So what has ended up happening, if you look at like a lot of the players in the space, is that they've actually taken all of that away and made it so you don't have to think about it. So for example, Acorns just rounds up to like the top, whatever, let's say you spend $1.80, it rounds up to $2 and take that 20 cents and puts it into savings or something for you automatically without you even doing anything and thinking about it, because there's just so much friction in trying to get people to basically change their behavior. It's really, really hard. And there's very few products that have successfully been able to do that over the long term, right? And maybe some games or something like that, right? So just think about that as you kind of build this company. I do think what you're doing is valuable and it's super important. And if you can figure out a way to do that and also make some money out of this, that would also be great, right? So I don't know that the people that you're trying to help are necessarily willing to pay for this. Maybe they will. You just need to validate that a little bit better. But if not, consider trying to make this easy where people don't have to think and it just automatically saves the money, puts it in an ETF or whatever, and then helps them with their financials.
Agreed. Yeah, nothing else to add there for me.
Awesome. All right, next up is my company Smart Entry Systems, based in Miami, Florida, developed a complete access control solution for gated residential communities, apartment buildings, and other types of multi-tenant properties to manage their visitor and resident entry access. Using Android tablets and Raspberry Pi, our software and cloud-based system is able to provide comparable or better feature sets at around 10% of the price versus traditional access control manufacturers.
So in general, you never want to compete on price. Okay, that's usually a race to the bottom, and more well-funded competitors will always be able to beat you there, right? I mean, you mentioned Android, right? Like if you look at where all the profits are right now, they're on iOS, right, on iPhone, right? Because basically Apple says I'm not going to compete on price, whereas what you're seeing in the Android ecosystem, in particular with regards to headset manufacturers, right? They're all like fighting who can get the best their price down, and essentially it's a race to the bottom. So just as an FYI, like, it's not, I like the fact that you're able to do this at a super, super low scale. But if you can talk a little bit more about the value that you provide, it's better. For example, it could just be really fast, or you don't need as many cameras or something like that. That could also be super helpful, right? Also, when you talk about, these complete solutions for gated communities, right? By definition, when you're saying that like that in your pitch, I'm not saying that this is exactly true, but when you're saying this like in your pitch, then the customer maybe is like the HOA, or it's like the building owner or whatever. It's like, it's a different customer than like the consumer. And that customer has different like metrics for like, or different behavior or patterns, right? In many cases, customers like that are like looking for more enterprise grade solutions and are willing to pay more money for it because of the perceived security of them, whether it's right or wrong. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what they're doing. So as a result, like just because you're cheaper, that actually might not necessarily help you make a sale. Maybe there's something better about that you can do that, say, I don't know, alarm.com or whatever, Nest, HomeCam, whatever does, right? And so, for enterprise grade solutions, just think differently. Maybe it's like the setup costs, right? Another thing that a lot of people struggle with, right, is the onboarding. Whenever you drop in a big solution like this, and then all of a sudden all these people have to do it, like, every person that's working at the front desk or something, in the retraining is a pain in the ass. And if you can basically build a pitch and say, look, you don't have to pay, you don't have to retrain, you don't have to do any of this, like, boom, we just drop it in and it works. That's great. Finally, the Raspberry Pi is kind of like a hacker's thing, right? It's like, it's not, I mean, yes, you can build pretty robust applications for it, but it's not necessarily something that, again, that somebody will, that's kind of like enterprise grade, like at least from a perception perspective, not from a reality, right? And so it's not really like a benefit for you to mention the Raspberry Pi in a pitch like this, right? Like just say, hey, look, we set up the hardware, right? And it's got a mobile app, boom, it works, right? And that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I do like the category a lot. So you didn't mention COVID, but obviously there's a real pickup in people who are just buying more and more online, so more and more e-commerce. And so these kind of like smart entry solutions are really, really important. And so you can be, thinking about the kinds of multifamily or mixed use buildings and maybe how commercial real estate developers are thinking about like adding new mail rooms. I mean, there just might be different ways to look at B2B kind of channels and stuff, but I definitely agree with what Mike is saying. Some of the selling points here focused on around price and Raspberry Pi, they're a little disconnected from like an enterprise solution. So think about tailoring your pitch a little bit more to who that actual customer is going to be.
I also noticed you've made several like follow-up comments to this thing in the chat. Look, and all of them are like features. It's got like this feature, it's got this feature, it's got like, this QR code thing and this QR code. Get rid of all that and be like, this is the benefit to the customer, right? The customer is going to like reduce onboarding by 50% and is going to time, and it's going to be able to, increase their security by like this much or something like that. And as a result of that, they're going to be, much better off or something like that. Those are like benefits. So just focus on that.
Fantastic. And since I haven't reminded everybody in a few minutes, if you're just joining us, please submit your pitch in the chat. And if you need a reference, you can see on the slide that is the structure there, but you can also visit fi.co/madlibs for more information on how we suggest you structure your pitch. Okay, next up, Vikram from Melbourne says, our company Mercy will develop an app web service to help doctors communicate with patients having language barriers by providing them real-time translation, prescription, and health log information.
Yeah, this is definitely pretty needed. The most challenging thing is can you do it, and do it well. That's also super important, because if you can't do it well, then the experience is going to be really bad, and people won't use it. But I do think that there's value there. But again, try to pitch this from the perspective of who's going to be buying this, right? If this is like an enterprise grade solution that you're selling into hospitals, right? Why do hospitals need this, right? Is it, because they're trying to reduce readmission by XYZ percentage? Like here in the United States, there's this whole fine balance between like the insurance providers and like the way they reimburse hospitals. So there's like, they're always kind of playing this dance. I'm sure in Australia, there's something different, right? So just make sure that, you're really, really pitching this from their perspective. And you could argue in your case that, the time is now, right? Because with shelter in place being, here for the foreseeable future, and people are doing more like office, online visits and things like that, maybe translation is even more important, right? Because you're not gonna have the translator there, or you're not gonna have a sibling there or something like that. So just make sure that you fit that in as well, because I think that could actually be really helpful. But seriously, if it's the hospital, right, now you're selling to CEOs. I know that you're trying to solve this for families, but the people that are paying you are CEOs. You got to solve their problems with this, right? So just think like that.
Yeah, nothing to add on that one. Totally agree with what Mike said. Think about the customer.
Fantastic. All right, Mike from Vancouver says, my company Autometrics is developing an industrial automation solution to enable automated real-time welding quality control. The solution is aiming to drastically reduce the need for professional training costs and expensive HDR camera setups in the welding industry, while maintaining or enhancing the safety and functionality. The solution uses advanced machine learning algorithms for fast and high accuracy data acquisition and analysis.
So I'm not really sure what you do from this pitch. You went really deep into it, but I'm not sure. So are you going after like auto manufacturers that they need to improve their welding? Because if they can improve their welding, they can get XYZ benefit, or to train employees on how to better weld, right? You talked a lot about analytics and all these other things, and it's like just really hard kind of to understand kind of what you do. But assuming that if that's the case, then again, I would build it from like, who the customer is. So it's either going to be like auto body shops that are fixing cars and things like that. And then, you're helping them onboard new tradespeople sooner and better with this technology. And if that's in fact true, then maybe there's some benefit there. And if not, then, you want to go and pitch this is with respect to like the car manufacturer, and the car manufacturer, is wasting this many millions of dollars on the assembly line whenever like a weld gets done incorrectly, or like the robot messes up and a person has to like fix it or something, right? So you got to like kind of like weave yourself into that, right? And finally, I think with a pitch like this, because a lot of people may just not be familiar with your industry, right? It's very common because it's kind of a specialized niche. You really want to try to quantify how large a problem like this actually is, right? So there's this many auto shops that are doing this much, they're doing millions of weldings every single year. On average, they lose 3 employees per year, which, extrapolates out to however many small businesses are doing this all over the Canada and the United States. We're going to solve that by doing this, right? And then we can be like, okay, this is kind of a big problem, right? And then, we can give you better advice.
Yeah, I echo the last thing that Mike said. It definitely sounds like you know this problem pretty thoroughly. At least, if not, you've fooled me in the way that you've constructed your pitch, because it just sounds like you have some industry knowledge. So yeah, speak to some of those quantitative.
Did we lose Dustin?
Yeah,
Dustin,
we lost Dustin, but I can finish up. Like, I mean, he's basically talking about adding quantitative things. Yeah, so in your case, I would take out all the machine learning, all of that stuff, visual, whatever you said, recognition, and replace it with stats, right? Like, this is how many welds get done. This is how much it costs to, replace an employee, how hard it is because, like, there's a shortage in tradespeople right now and all this stuff.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Mike, for that. And then hopefully Dustin will join us again real soon. Okay, next up is my company Action Rover is developing an offering for a web-based application to help patients with musculoskeletal inflammatory disorders to engage them in treatment decisions with a novel and empathic image-based tool.
Again, super cool, kind of like the other one we had with regards to the hospital and the translation, obviously very important. Anytime you're doing a healthcare business, though, it's very likely that your customer is not the end user, although it can be. So in this case, let's call it like a therapy app or a therapy coach. And I'm not sure where you're based, but if it's in the United States, then there's literally a class of apps here called digital therapeutics, and usually they need FDA approval to get that done. But let's say you're not in the United States, you don't need all that. It's still, you still need to kind of engage the entire healthcare system in order for doctors to either prescribe this or to be able to tap into various information that you may not have, right? So potentially like the patient's electronic health record and how they're tracking and things like that. So if that's the case, and I don't know if it's true, right? Like if that's the case, you want to make sure you talk about the value prop from the buyer's perspective. Now, if this is just a kind of like a coach, right? Then that has nothing to do with insurance, has nothing to do with anything else. So let's say you're in the bucket of like, meditation apps or fitness apps or something like that. Let's say you're in that bucket. And then what you want to talk about is kind of like what the market looks like right now for adoption of products like this. So for example, there's this many people with this disease that they're used X number of apps for this, and this is we're kind of building off of that behavior, and we're charging $50 a month or something like that. And then there's some potential there as well.
Fantastic. Also, welcome back, Dustin. We lost you there for a second, but we finished up on that one. And I don't know if you got a chance to hear the last pitch, so we're just going to move on to the next one. Keep it going. All right. Scott says, my company, Cooking Conmigo, is developing an online marketplace for chefs to host virtual cooking classes to help professional chefs develop new streams of income, build their personal brand, and connect with new customers while providing a fun, engaging, and delicious way for people to get access to food without leaving their kitchens.
And because of COVID-19, we believe that we're going to get a lot of traction, right? And this would be really helpful in this, because it's actually probably true. And I think this is something that could be super valuable, since there's so many people at home and everybody's cooking right now, essentially, right? So I do think that it does make sense. Like, if you can't get like decent chefs, then it's going to be hard for you to get people that want to cook on there, that want to use it. So I do think that makes sense. You know, you're kind of like I don't know, you're like Peloton, but for cooking or something. I don't know. It's pretty cool. So I do think that there's a value there. You know, what would help is talking about how you make this experience like real seamless and real easy. So one of the challenges with cooking, right, is just that there's just like a lot of variables, right? And, you know, having a chef like teach you over thing, obviously it's popular, very popular segment on TV, but it's like, you know, people are using it as like kind of like just to learn a lot of things. They're not necessarily like hands-on. And when you say class, I'm like, okay, we're doing this together, like right now we're about to cook and all that. So, you know, I think for a company like yours, you really want to think about how you make that experience like super, super easy, right? Like, you know, getting all the ingredients and all that in one place to ensure that somebody can have that, or making sure that things get delivered before the class, because otherwise you run the risk of having like a really suboptimal experience, right? The other angle for you to go, and maybe this is what you might just have to do, is just to basically do kind of like almost like a master class type thing, right? Like master class basically will get like, I don't know, like Steph Curry and various other people that are like really good at what they do. So you need to get like the best of the best of the best chefs. And then just people would just tune in and just do that on the side, and it basically pay subscription. So that's the other angle. So, right, I don't know what you're doing there, and this is why I'm giving you kind of like a fork in the advice, but it'd be really helpful in your pitch to basically specify. But I do think that the timing for what you're doing is really good, and so you know, that's great.
Yeah, to give you yet another fork of advice, I guess I would kind of think about, you know, if the chef is using the platform as a new way to add a new income stream, right? It's the at-home cook that's really your customer, and there are so many ways that that basically food delivery is changing at-home cooking experience, the whole takeoff of breads and things like that. There's loosened regulations in the United States where previously restaurants weren't able to kind of act as food distributors, but now they're sort of doing more farm to table type things where they're sourcing directly from local farms and then packaging directly in the restaurant and shipping to consumers. So I would think maybe a little bit about the partner opportunities, and maybe that kind of resurgence in farm to table could be a way for you to find a channel that makes sense, right? Between somebody who already is receiving like a meal in a box, and then finds the chefs that are going to help them prepare that. Just a food for thought. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yeah, and one last thing. I mean, if you're going to go into like this whole space, which is massively competitive, right? There's all sorts of different variations. They may not be doing exactly the same thing as you said, but there are definitely a lot of players in the space. You really need to address that, right? You need to be like, look, we know that there's, you know, 150,000 apps in the App Store for cooking and this and that, but what we do different is the XYZ, which will basically put us over the top.
Fantastic. All right, next up we have Hiba, which Hiba from Syria and I chatted in the Facebook group. So thanks for joining us, Hiba, and for improving upon your pitch. We've already worked on it a little bit and you've added some more specificity. So I'm really excited to see that. So hi, I am Hiba from Syria. My company, iCare, is developing a mobile application to help parents to detect early behavior disorders in kids, with many online services to help parents handle each case with the right ways by tips, advice, and consultation from therapists and psychologists. To be more specific, iCare will start with 8 to 14-year-old kids, and our main current behavioral problems are violence, anger issues, and lying. Finally, we match families with specialists, and we are currently bringing our own therapists and psychologist teams to help parents communicate with them easily.
So I think this is a really good idea. I think that you're still going a little too broad. I think you really need to just solve one behavior really, really well. And if you can do that, then you can add on more behavior. So if it's like violence, I mean, that even violence itself is very broad. Maybe it's like, you know, speech or something like that. Maybe like the person can't speak very well, so they have to learn how to speak or something like that. Speech therapy in itself is like a whole class of things. So I would go even like more narrow with this, because if you can figure out one of these, you'll be able to scale it out to a variety of other types of folks. But overall, I thought that the pitch was pretty good. It's also would be helpful if this is like a direct to consumer play, which I think it probably makes sense. And if you're matching people to various therapists, then I think it's important for you to mention just how you're able to vet people, right? You're putting like your child's life into a therapist's hands, right? And so the vetting of this is going to be super valuable, because like obviously it's going to have massive effects on the child. So you want to probably talk about that too, but narrow it to one type of behavior. Seriously, like I know you want to do a lot, and I think you can do a lot, but start with one, do that extremely well, so well that all the parents are telling other parents that this is the only way to do this, essentially. Like this is the best way to do it. And then you might be onto a gold mine.
I would also mention the one thing I think is kind of missing. I think it's implied that you would probably make money through referral, but I think it's not 100% clear to me how you make money. So that's definitely something you want to figure out if you haven't thought about it yet.
Awesome. All right. And this is our last pitch for today. But I will put a link to our Facebook group where you can continue the conversation, get more feedback on your pitches and ideas over on the Facebook group. But last one for today, Nick from Seattle says, my company, FoodSave 360, makes hardware that you can attach to your pantry wall or fridge door, so you can scan the products before you stock your fridge or pantry and get notifications when products expire or when you're almost out of stock, so you can make your grocery shopping easy. It's the same device that you could use in a small restaurant or bar to know what you have in stock.
I guess I don't know how big of a problem this is and whether people care enough about it. And I think it would be really helpful for you to talk about that, right? Unfortunately, right, particularly us here in the United States, we have a pretty consumer like type culture, right, where we just buy a lot of stuff that we don't need. And it's like a pretty big behavioral problem, and people overbuy stuff on a regular basis. And so, having that understanding is maybe like important for some people, but maybe not for others. And so just kind of think about that, right? Another thing you might want to think about is that I wonder if there's like a really specific type of customer, like a vegan that needs this amount of things and has stuff that perishes quickly, so they got to know better about the stuff that's there. Could that really work? And finally, just how this would have to be like really amazing for you to basically not change people's behavior. So your sensor would have to be so good that every single time I take something out of the bag, like it's a tomato, oh, it's a tomato, right? Oh, there's 6 of them in the bag, right? So I don't have to sit there and do any manual data entry. Otherwise, it's really challenging. Now, look, in commercial kitchens, this is a fundamentally different problem, right? Because these are small businesses, and this is fundamentally affects like their bottom line and how they do things, right? But in your case, you're dealing with consumers, and they just have different sets of behaviors. Now, you can make a case that because of COVID and because of like food shortages and because the supply chains are already starting to get pretty strained with like a lot of the meat producers not able to provide, that people need to make their things last longer and stuff like that, and their food lasts longer and all that. So I do think there's some value there. But with a product like this, it's like, again, it's really hard to understand like how expensive this is, what's the price point you're coming in at, and whether people care enough. So if you can provide some research that people do care enough about this, and I can kind of like jump to conclusions and maybe assume that maybe, but you don't want that. You want people to just know, right? Like, yes, this is super valuable. that's what I would do if I were you. But keep at it. I think what you're doing is important. I think it is important for you to basically like, try to help people reduce consumption in some ways. And if you can maybe use this to build people's grocery lists and stuff like that automatically, that could also be really helpful.
The thing that you said at the very end is what I wanted to add. It's like you use the word scan in your pitch, and I immediately thought of scanning barcodes. I know, like, for fresh produce, that's not maybe it's feasible, but like you said at the very end, if there's maybe a way that you can identify these individual items to some extent and then partner with some kind of food retailer to like replace the order. I mean, if there's a way that you could by scanning the items, be a part of the reordering process and get like some kind of referral fee. I mean, that would be a really nice business with recurring revenue as opposed to selling a hardware device or a subscription that goes with it.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you to everyone who joined us today and submitted your ideas. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you being here. If you're looking for more free startup focused webinars, you can visit onlinestartupevents.com, including an upcoming webinar we have with an astronaut. So you may not want to miss that. If you're interested in the Founder Institute Pre-Seed Accelerator, you can learn more at fi.co/join/webinar. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Yeah.